Looks like it.
Okay. So thank you for checking. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our last taste of grad school. Welcome back from your break. I know it's been a rough week coming back and having to adjust. The faculty and the staff know and could see that it's difficult. So we're here for you, and we hope you had a great break. Before I read Dr. Leah Brew's biography, I just want to make sure everyone signed in. Make sure you always sign out, even if you leave early. Don't forget. Turn in your evaluation too. Don't forget to do that, even if you have to leave for class or something. Also grab an extra sandwich if you haven't gotten one already. Make sure you get one for now and a water. And we have enough for you to get seconds, so definitely grab more. As far as the program, make sure you're reading the newsletter and turning in that updated timesheet to John Pineda. Also talk to me as a reminder anytime you need to have a one-on-one, set that up with me. I've had a couple this past week, so I'm still doing that. I'm going to do that for the whole year. I'll announce the events for the rest of the semester after Leah's talk and after Q&A. So she'll speak. You'll talk about the article and discuss about her and her profession, etc. And then you'll have a chance to ask her questions. And then I'll, at the end, announce the events, which are on your handout. This is the rest of it, but I'll say a little more about that. A check-in question. Let's say our name, our year, what cohort we're in, and the question that relates to counseling and the article you read, and your own identity and your own story is, what do you do to de-stress, and what are some of the stressors you face based on aspects of who you are and your identity? So I can start, and then we'll go this way, all the way around. All right. So I'm Anna, and how I like to de-stress now is yoga. It's been a great way to just declutter my mind, in a way to work out, but also really meditate and work on my mind. So it's been a big help in terms of how I de-stress now. I've been doing it a lot, so that consistent practice has been much needed self-care and de-stress. The way or some of the stressors I face now that connects back to my identity, and also some things I've been facing would be definitely, family obligations, and that connects to my identity of being family oriented and my culture of being a collective and but being raised that way, where we're a collective and we're a team and we're going through the same thing. So being raised around those family values, definitely family obligations, especially around the holidays, are a blessing but are a stress, making sure everyone's okay and making sure I'm okay. Also, I think for me for me, I feel that being in another transition time of my life, like graduating college was a transition time, and now this is another transition time. Choosing my career is what I'm dealing with right now. That's fine.
Were we supposed to mention the stressors?
Also,
okay.
Yes.
Stressors that have to do with our identity?
Yeah.
Okay.
Link it back to your identity, because we want to get you to start talking about your faculty mentors and us staff want you to start talking about your identity and get into practice now that you're thinking about grad school, and it's grad school time right now, like turning in those apps and all of that, getting that prepared. But even if you're going to do it a year later, this is a time mid-year where we want you to assess who you are, what are you going to do for the second half of the year, and how is it going to apply to grad school and the rest of your life? Like, what is your story? What is your identity? We want you to practice talking about it. But go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Diana. I am a third year, and I'm a psychology major. Well, I have a really bad memory right now.
Your cohort.
Oh, I am in the fall 2017 cohort, so I just joined about 3 months ago.
What do you do to de-stress?
Oh, okay. Let's see. To de-stress, I'm usually by myself. I'll often sleep because I don't feel like I get enough sleep. But if I'm not sleeping, then I don't know, I'll watch a show or watch a TED Talk that is relevant to me, or listen to a sermon from a few of my favorite pastors. And then I guess for me, I guess the most relevant stressor right now is just going through life. This has probably been the hardest year so far, and I know that life only gets harder and you learn to cope. But yeah, I've just been transitioning into adulthood and seeing who I really am, what my flaws are, and learning more about the ugliness inside of me. And dealing with that, seeing that in my relationships, and then learning to be malleable and to let my heart become softened so that I can use that experience to better empathize with clients in the future, and also just people in my life, people I encounter. And so, yeah, I can just be more personable.
Tell me your name again.
Diana.
Diana, let me help you reframe. Instead of thinking of those parts that are as being ugly, like the ugliness in you, think of it as maybe the wounded part of you that needs to heal, because if you feel healed, then those things go away.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do to relax? With just the TV and listening to the things that you talked about? Those are your
I'll usually just
de-stressors?
sit by myself, because when I'm with other people, then I feel even more irritated.
Because you're an introvert.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm just around people. Like,
you get your
why
energy.
are you talking?
Yeah. You get your energy being alone.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ciara. I'm also a psych major, and it's my last year. I'm graduating in May. I'm part of the fall 17 cohort, so also a new member.
Mm-hmm.
And what I do to de-stress, just like her, I like to stay by myself and just watch videos and relax. And my stressors, I would say, I'm starting to look at the stuff I have to do for grad school, just stuff I need to turn in. So I'm definitely finishing those up. And as a first generation college student, I feel like I don't really have that support from my family, college-wise.
Yes.
But I have my peers, so I have that from them. I think it's a lot, but I can do it.
Okay. Could you guys tell me your ethnicities?
I'm Vietnamese.
Vietnamese?
Filipino.
Filipino. Okay, thank you. Are you gonna make the two of them in the back talk, or just everybody at the table?
Yes, everybody. And let me
Then come to the table. Come join us at the table.
Let me repeat what the check-in is, so everyone knows. Welcome. So you're gonna say your name, your year, what cohort you're in, how you de-stress, and what are some of your stressors, and how is that connected to who you are and your identities. Make sure you grab food, by the way, inside and inside out. So go ahead, C. Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is C. I'm a health science major, fourth year.
Your cohort?
I was the first cohort, so spring 2016, I believe. Yeah, it was a really small one. And then what I do to de-stress.
Yes, and what stressors and how do you have and how do they connect to who you are?
Okay, so what I do to distress is I go hiking. I really like climbing to the top and then looking over the view and saying like I did it. So that's one of my de-stress plans. And what are my stressors? That's it.
How are they connected to your identity?
I guess one of my stressors is I'm first generation college student, right? So my parents, they can't really provide like any support for me in terms of they don't understand what that process is because they've never been through it. So for me, I only have the older brother I can relate to because he's already gone through the college process. So I guess like kind of forces me to be more independent because I'm kind of on my own. I'm kind of exploring all areas. I mean, even with my older brother, he gives me advice, but he was in different, concentration, different fields. So, my own way.
And what is your ethnicity?
I'm Chinese.
Chinese. Thank you.
My name is Emily. I'm a first year MPH student, also the GA for the program. How I de-stress?
Yes.
Okay. I de-stress. I'm a talker. I love, I'm sensitive, I'm empathetic, I'm really open. So I like to talk about my problems, my feelings, and I like to vent. So luckily I have a lot of family and friends that I can do that with. So that's how I de-stress. Also, I like to watch TV, which I know isn't the best way to de-stress because we're actually probably just the opposite with all the stuff that we watch nowadays. But yeah, just getting a good book in front of you. I do that. I don't read as much as I'd like to, but I do have a book that I've been reading for the past month.
What is
that I'm
it?
hopefully finishing. It's called Modern Romance. And a stressor that relates to my identity. I would have to say something similar to Anna, just because as you guys know, I lived in Oregon for the last 9 years with just my parents. And now that I'm back in California where I was born, I have a lot more family members around, a lot more immediate family, like my grandmother and my aunt and my cousins, and just being around them and this kind of environment has been kind of stressful in a good and a bad way. Just seeing the dynamic of being in a big family again because I had just been in another state with just my parents, so it's been a little different. And just trying to deal with a lot of issues that arise when you have older grandparents that need help and, just trying to divide responsibility and trying to, just trying to make it through.
And what's your ethnic background?
I'm Ecuadorian.
Thank you.
My name's Sonai. My health science major. I just started in Ally Health Academy this semester. This was about the first.
Fall 2017.
What I usually do to de-stress is just work out, go to the gym, and I like to read books, but I don't read as much as I would want to, messy and stuff. And what was the last question?
How do you, what's one of your stressors and how does it connect to your identity?
Okay, so I'm the oldest in my family, so I have 2 siblings. The youngest is 8 and 16. So I'm kind of like the role model in the house, kind of in a way. So I'm trying to do the best I can and provide them with support and give them advice on which route to go or pretty much help them out in any way possible. And since I am the first one to go to college, it's kind of hard and stressful because my friends never gone through it, so they don't have as much support. But I find support on campus and with Ally Health Academy, so that's kind of balancing out so I can make it through. But yeah, being the oldest in my family is kind of stressful and trying to provide them with support.
Especially the oldest female. And what's your ethnicity?
Mexican.
Mexican. So it's a Latina for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You. have household responsibilities in addition to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm Ivy, and this is my first year joining this Ally Health Academy. It's very helpful. And my ethnicity, I'm a Taiwanese, and I'm the third year majoring in communication science and disorder. How do I deal with stress? I play with children. I laugh with them. I like to be alone. I don't like to be around too many like adult.
It's okay. You're allowed to feel that way. It's okay.
I will be judged, but when I'm around children, I can be myself. So that's good. And yeah, I like to be alone. I love to listen to sermons too. I love to read books. And I do meditation too. I read Bible and then listen to sermons. And stressors that I'm facing, I think it's generally like school, the exams, the finals, the internship, and what I need to do to get to grad school.
Stressors related to your identity.
Related to my
Your identity.
Oh, yes.
As it maybe being Taiwanese or a first generation college student or.
I think for me, it's more like my personality because I'm a perfectionist. Like, I would want things to be perfect when I try. So I always expect to see the results. But when I don't see that coming, I get very disappointed and very anxious.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's actually part of your culture.
Um,
Within
I think it's
Japanese, Taiwanese culture, the assumption is you should be perfectionistic. And what's derogatory is to be lazy. Like if somebody calls you lazy, it's the biggest insult ever. Mm-hmm. But with Far East Asian culture, you're expected to be perfectionistic. That's normal and considered healthy.
Oh, okay.
So it's not just you, and your mom taught it to you because she's probably perfectionistic too, right? Yeah. Asian moms. Different than Latina moms.
Well, thank you. Yes, and thank you, Leah, and thank you everyone for being brave. I know talking about your identity is very personal, and it takes being brave and being very honest to be able to share that. And I see that going on now is the cross-cultural centers and cultural centers, and with politics and race being high in right now in the U.S., talking about it is something to be brave about. So thank you for sharing. And now I'm going to introduce Dr. Leah Brew. So in front of you, you should have her biography. So I'm going to read the first paragraph, but underneath you could read more about her research experience. And she also has a biography on the Cal State Fullerton website. So Dr. Leah Brew is professor and chair in the Department of Counseling here at CSUF. Her areas of research, publication, and teaching focus primarily on basic counseling skills and issues related to diversity, sensitivity, and advocacy. Her recent research projects include a model of spiritual identity development of gay men, establishing ethical codes for working with interracial relationships, and a model of how interracial couples navigate cultural differences when parenting. Dr. Brew is a licensed professional clinical counselor, LPCC number 45 in California, and is the LPCC representative on the Board of Behavioral Sciences, which is a regulatory board for master's degree level mental health professionals. She is a biracial Japanese American who was the first in her family to attend college and advocates for other first generation college students to seek graduate education. So thank you, Dr. Leah Brew, for coming.
You're welcome.
And the article, if you want a hard copy, you can circulate it. We have 2 printed copies. Let's take it away, Dr. Brew. We have 3.
I'm not going to be talking a lot about it, so.
Okay. It's gonna be, Dr. Brew is gonna direct
I'm gonna do this
discussion will be.
like a counseling class.
Yes.
Um,
Perfect.
So how many of you are possibly interested in going into the mental health field. So you might be, no, maybe, no, okay. I just liked that article because one of the reasons, or one of the important aspects of becoming a therapist, regardless of what kind you choose, is that you have to engage in self-care. And a lot of you said like watching TV, and while that's a great way to just numb your brain, physiologically, it doesn't relax your body. Meditation does, reading does, whatever you're reading. Exercise does, right? That lowers your stress level. But what happens in the profession of counseling is once you learn sort of the core basic pieces of providing therapy, then what gets in the way are your own issues and your own limitations, your own family structure. And so part of what we do in our program is we kind of stir up students' issues to make them explore themselves, like you had talked about. You're discovering kind of who you are and how to work on yourself. Every class has some assignment where you have to analyze yourself as part of it, because it's really critical in order to be effective as a therapist. So let's say you have dad issues. I call it the therapy god. The therapy god makes sure that all of your clients is your dad, right? So and so you're like, great, this is awesome. My dad makes me mad, and here is this guy who's just like my dad. So you have to work on yourself so you don't react to people in ways that are, I don't know, personalizing who they are when you really don't know them and have to be in a kind of different position. So I like that. And I also picked that article because I think everybody could do mindfulness. I think it's a really helpful method for self-care. It's not just meditation, which is also very, very good, but mindfulness means being mindful fully in whatever moment that you're in. You know, so like if you're cleaning a toilet, be focused on cleaning the toilet. If you're studying, focus on studying. The research is really clear about multitasking and how ineffective it is. In fact, there's some research on, they even published it in the New York Times, that when students take notes on laptops, they don't absorb the information as well as when they handwrite it. So we decided as a department, we're not having laptops in our class anymore unless somebody has a disability. Because your note-taking like this doesn't sink in the same way. Hi. So I guess what I'm going to do a little bit about sort of my opinion of grad school, since half of you are interested in therapy, and then I'm going to talk more about therapy specifically in the different professions. So just grad school in general, I hope that you all pursue grad school. Like you, I'm a first-generation college student. My parents never went to college, never stepped foot on a college campus ever. My mother, we immigrated here when I was a year old. My mom was 25. I was born in Okinawa. My father's military. And he worked through his career starting in the military and then went into civilian life as an engineer. So when I did my undergrad, my parents sort of expected that. And then when I started going to grad school, they said, why are you still in school? And I said, oh, I want to be a therapist and I have to get that. And then when I did a doctorate, my dad says, you're just avoiding work. I'm like, okay, let's be clear. I worked my own way through school. I worked full time and I went to school full time. I got out of my undergrad in 4 years. Then I worked in corporate America and went to master's program part-time. And about halfway through my doctorate, I quit my full-time job and just went to school for the second half of my doctorate. So I paid for the whole thing without parental, even emotional support, because they didn't understand it. Now my dad's like very proud of me. He's like, oh, I get it. You mean you're off the whole summer? I'm like, yeah, if I want to be, I can be. I always work, but it's nice to have the option, right? So they didn't understand, like you. They didn't know how to navigate the system. They didn't understand how much homework I had, how much responsibility I had. And then, you know, what I would do is go to school in my undergrad, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then I would work Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. And then I worked retail, so I worked from open to close every day. And then I'd squeeze in my studying in between and go dancing at night. I don't know how I did that. I don't think I slept enough. But like many of you, I had to kind of figure out my own way through to get to grad school. And the world is kind of a different place now. You kind of need a master's degree to, I don't know, be more successful. So whatever your profession is, I really encourage you to get a master's degree. And I think all of you said you're juniors, right? You're a senior. So your junior and senior courses that are like in your area of interest, imagine doing nothing but that, right? And grad school is a little bit different than undergrad. Full-time, the maximum number of classes you can take is 12 units. Part-time is 6 hours, 2 classes. So it's a lot different in that way because you're expected to do 3 hours of homework for every 1 hour you're in class. So if you're taking a 3-unit single course, you should be doing about 9 hours a week of homework. Of course, it's never 9 hours the first week of classes. It's like 50 hours at midterm and 50 hours at finals time, right? Because that's kind of how the work waxes and wanes. So you're going to be investing more time in your own learning in grad school. For example, in our program, we don't lecture on the textbooks. We assume you do the reading and you come to class and we complement what you've read and we have discussions. And in our program, we break into groups. About almost all of our classes, half of them are experiential. Break into small groups, do discussions, practice skills. The group therapy class, we actually do group therapy for half the class. So it's really different than your undergrads, especially in psychology. The other part of navigating grad school is how to be successful. So even if you don't want to go to grad school now, you should really make sure that your last 2 years, you earn the best grade you can. Because when we look at admissions and we look at what you got your freshman year, we don't hold as much weight as what you did there because, you're just starting college and some of you may be moving away for the first time, so you're going to make bad choices. But by your junior and senior year, we feel like you should be serious. So most grad programs, you need a minimum of 3.0 to get in, but you need a 3.5 to be competitive in your last 60 units, at least in our program. And I know social work is the same. So you really need to invest your time into your GPA, in particular in your major area. Now, I will also say that we've had people who were pre-med and they had really bad grades their last year, but they were in chemistry, and we would have gotten bad grades in chemistry too. So we don't hold that to the same weight. We kind of look at the courses where you did well and the courses where you didn't do well. But even if you're not sure you want to go to grad school, you should act as if you were as you finish your undergraduate degree, because even if you're not going to go now, you might go 10 years from now. You don't know. The other thing in terms of getting into grad school is letters of recommendation, regardless of what program you go to. You want to get to know some faculty members. So if there are courses that you've taken with more than one faculty member, ask to meet during their office hours. Tell them you're interested in grad school. Get to know them a little bit, because you want somebody that writes a meaningful letter of recommendation for you. Basically, when we say, yes, this student took my class and they showed up on time and they were never absent or, absent a reasonable amount of time, and they earned a grade of whatever they earned a grade of. And we're like, yeah, this professor doesn't know this student at all. So that's not very meaningful. And you're going to want to have at least 1 or 2 letters from professors. And then if you have an employer, you would want to get letters from an employer. So part of what's going on for you right now is that just like the last couple of years of high school, now the last couple of years of your undergrad, you want to think about looking forward to grad school and getting to know your faculty members. And most of them, at least in all the majors that you guys have, they're nice people. I wouldn't say that for all majors on this campus, but for the ones that in our college, they're all nice people, and they will get to know you, and they'd be interested in getting to know you, especially if you're doing the same degree now that you want to continue on to. What else can I tell you about grad school? It's a lot more work, it's a lot harder, and it's a lot more interesting. So I have to admit, when I'd be in class, I was riveted by whatever my professors would say, because it's stuff that I wanted to do. It was relevant to the work that I wanted to do. I could see the connection. Whereas, I don't know, I vividly remember this horrible trigonometry teacher in my undergrad. Like, he barely spoke English, and I was really good at math. And I was like, it's a good thing I'm good at math, because I didn't understand A, what you said, and B, how you even said it, because so bad. But you know, as you get into these classes that are what you're interested in, then it's important. And if you're not positive of what you want to do, meet with faculty from those departments, or go to the Career Center and they can do testing. We were talking earlier about personality types, the Myers-Briggs. Sounds like we have a room full of introverts except for you. You seem like you might be an extrovert. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
There's
I
no,
think the opposite.
you're an
But
introvert?
people say that.
Yeah, well, talkative people, we have to like clear up introversion, extroversion. There's two definitions. One means outgoing versus shy, and then the other means where do you get your energy? Yeah. So I'm an outgoing introvert.
That's how I feel.
Yeah.
I love people, and then I'm done and I need to go be alone. Right? And then I'm alone and I get my energy, recharge my batteries, and I'm like, okay, now I need people again. Yeah. Yeah. So, and you want to think about your personality type and what's a good career for you and a good fit for you. So when I went into the mental health field and I started doing my internship with my master's degree and seeing clients, I was like, oh man, I can't do this 40 hours a week. It drains me. It's exhausting. So I had to think about what could I do instead. And when I decided to become a faculty member, it was good because I can have a private practice on the side. I can see students, but then I can also go be alone and do research. And I don't mind working when I'm alone. Like for me, downtime means time away from people. Although sometimes I like to stare stupidly at the TV too. But most of the time, I don't want to just sit around. I want to be stimulated. Like you guys were talking about listening to your favorite preachers and stuff. And I listen to podcasts a lot because I love stimulation. I'm curious. I want to grow. I want to learn. So it's about like being able to balance how much energy that you can be around people and what kind of time. And, you know, and by contrast, not that anyone's doing this here, if you are somebody who's extroverted and you're, say, an accountant where you're sitting in an office all day and you barely have human contact, that's not going to work either. So you got to make sure to sort of construct your world, your career around something that fits your temperament. It's really, really critical. There's some jobs that being a perfectionist would be really outstanding, and other jobs where it's so inappropriate. So you like, they're just not, they're like therapy. You can't be a perfectionist in therapy because there's no right answer. There's only one wrong answer, and that's never have sex with a client. After that, everything else depends. Everything else depends that like, and there are different paths that you can take that have different consequences, but there's no right or wrong. So like therapy would make you go crazy. May not be a good fit for you. Health science would be fine because then you can like massage numbers and do your experiments and explore questions and get answers. So you have to make sure that you have to know yourself a little bit. And if you don't know, if you're not sure, then the Career Center on campus is really helpful. They have instruments they can evaluate based on your personality. These are people who are happy in their careers, who have personalities like yours, and then making that work for you. So I just want you, I'm sure you've heard this over and over again. Grad school is actually fun. It's hard work. and it's fun because you're enjoying it. Like it sometimes would be hard to get my butt in the chair and start studying, but when I was studying to learn once I got to grad school instead of worrying about grades, and I actually did better because I was trying to learn instead of trying to get an A.
I second that. It's a lot of work, very time consuming, but when you get your butt in the chair and you actually start working on whatever you're working on, it's stuff that, I mean, I love. I'm loving it. I signed up for this, so I'm going and I'm learning more, and it's awesome.
It's fun,
it's
right?
Really fun. It's a lot of work and you're always tired, but it's fun.
Yeah. And then even doing your homework assignments, they're meaningful.
Yeah.
Like hopefully 90% of what you do, you're like, oh yeah, I learned something from doing this homework assignment. Whereas sometimes you feel like, oh, it's just rote memorization and regurgitation, right? I felt that way when I took geology.
Oh.
Now I'm like, I wish I learned more in geology because I'm kind of curious about stuff, but when I was 18, that didn't seem very important to me. So I just want to encourage you all to for sure go to grad school, even if not right now, if you can't navigate it financially. But there are resources. There are resources on this campus that can help you do that. And Grad Studies has a program for first generation college students that the Allied Health, this whole program kind of feeds into that program really well. Okay, so I think that's all I was kind of thinking about for grad school in general. And I want to talk a little bit about the mental health professions. So you're both psychology majors and you're doing communicative disorders, right? You had said that. You're doing communicative disorders. Yeah. So you're doing health science. But one of you is interested in counseling potentially. Which one of you? Yeah. You are. Okay, so health science. So let me kind of give you a big picture of the larger mental health field. So at the top of the food chain are psychiatrists, and psychiatrists are medical doctors. And the field was born out of psychologists. Mental health was, actually mental illness was born out of psychiatrists. And they're medical doctors, and back in the day, they actually used to do therapy, but now what they do is they prescribe drugs. They meet with people for 15 minutes, they get a list of symptoms, and they decide which drug is most appropriate for that symptom based on the drug company that bribed them the most. I'm a little cynical. It doesn't mean that medication isn't helpful for people who struggle with certain illnesses, but it's a damaged system, like our political system. And then underneath the psychiatrists are psychologists. In order to become a psychologist, you really need a PhD in psychology. And the normal path is to go from an undergraduate in psychology to a doctoral program in psychology. It's almost useless to do the master's in psychology unless they're preparing you for an MFT or LPCC. But the challenge with that is most programs that have doctorates, they're only in clinical psychology. And clinical psychology still has that medical model of thinking about clients. So they think people are sick, and how do you get them well enough to get back to work or live their lives more normally? And I'm overgeneralizing. This isn't true for every single program, but as a general rule, culturally, clinical psych is very left hemisphere. You get a heavy emphasis on testing and measurement and research and diagnosis. Not a whole lot of time is spent on how to help people. You get some of that, but it's more about the assessment piece. That's the emphasis for clinical psych. In the state of California, the doctoral program, all the psych programs are clinical psych, except for one in Santa Barbara that's a blended counseling psych and clinical psych. And who knows if that counseling psych will survive, because the clinical psych people are always trying to wipe it out. In psychology as a whole, there is a lot of, cliquishness, meanness between their groups, because there's like clinical psych, counseling psych, experimental psych, all these different areas, and they all think they're superior over the others. So you kind of have that layered into the work that you're going to do if you go into a psych program. If you're willing to leave the state, there are some clinical psych programs, but it is a dying breed, or counseling psych programs, but it's really a dying breed. The advantage to having your doctorate in psychology is you get to be called doctor, which is super cool. It's a 5-year program. So by the time you finish your dissertation and finish all your hours and you take the licensure exam, you can do that after your 5th year. You'd be eligible to do that. And in the mental health system, you get paid the best. When you have a doctorate, those are the highest paying jobs. In fact, one of the things I wanted to tell you about the reason to go to grad school is there's a really strong correlation to the higher degree that you have, the more income you're going to have. But you can't look at your income right now, right? Because what you could do is say, well, I'm a poor college student, and I have this friend who's working 40 hours a week, making 50 grand, and I'm making, like $15 an hour, 20 hours a week. But if we were to go forward and look in 20 years, people who have graduate level degrees are earning significantly more money. Those people who are making their 50 grand now, they'll still be making 50 grand 20 years from now, and you'll be making 100 to 150 grand. So if for no other reason, go to grad school because you'll get paid better. And it's fun. So in psychology, psychologists do get paid higher. But what's interesting is there are very few jobs because they're so expensive. So, but it's an option. If you are shooting for a doctorate in psychology, you really need to have a 4.0 because they have about, like UCI might have 200 to 300 applicants for 10 positions. Very, very few people get in. And then we drop down to the master's level people. That's who we are. We have the licensed marriage and family therapy degree, the licensed professional clinical counselor, and the licensed clinical social worker. If they decide to go into private practice and they hang up the shingle and start their own business, nobody knows the difference between them. The work is the same. So what makes a difference is the degree and how you're prepared. So in social work, there's a heavier emphasis on the macrocosm, meaning how does society and do social structures impact the individual? They prepare their students more effectively to work with severe mental illness like bipolar disorder and schizophrenia and severe addiction, or extremely low, like well below the poverty level, low income individuals. So if that's the people that you want to work with, and you can do therapy as a social worker, and that's where you'll get your emphasis. You also get an opportunity to do learn about social policy and how to make change. So I sit on the licensure board that regulates all 3 of those fields, plus school psychologists who do evaluations in schools. And the laws that we make, that's in a way doing social work kind of work. So I decided to sit on the licensure board. Well, part of it was when I moved to the state, there was no LPCC, and I didn't qualify for the MFT. So I could teach people to become MFTs, but I wasn't qualified to see clients because they have to follow the letter of the law. So I worked with a group of people to get the LPCC license in this state. We wrote 3 different bills. It took 7 years, a lot of compromises. So that's social work kind of work. So you learn like from the bottom, from the individual client all the way up to social policy. Part of what the social work class does is the program, they all go to Sacramento every year and do advocacy work and try to get their legislators. Now, I'll tell you, all of our fields do that, but they have a heavier emphasis on that macrocosm. Marriage and family therapy programs, also a master's level degree, in California are different than the rest of the country. MFT was born in California in this country. More than 50% of the licensed MFTs in the country are in California. And it started off really as preparing people to do therapy but therapy with individuals, couples, children, or families. But in other states, it evolved a little bit differently to be a systemic view, to look at the client from their microsystem, from their family system perspective. So you can't just look at an individual and do work. I have to find out, tell me about your family and tell me about how they work. And ideally, let's get your whole family into the room, because you really can't change one person without changing the whole system. And that's true. And neither the social workers or the counselors deny that. They agree that that happens. But there's a heavier emphasis on looking at the larger family system when working as an MFT. In this state, because we have 50% of the MFTs, an organization, the California Association for Marriage and Family Therapists, CAMFT, they have like 38,000 members or 40,000 members, like as many people as there are on this campus, I think. And they have lobbyists and lawyers and all kinds of money to provide resources to their membership. And they have a lot of power in the state government. So that is the mental health profession that has the most power in this state, the MFT. Not true in the other states, but just in California. So if you know for sure, no way in the world you're going to ever move away, be an MFT in California. Because that's where all the power is. They're stronger than the psychologists. They're stronger than the social workers. In all the other states, they're at the bottom, underneath the psychologists and the social workers and the counselors. And then counseling, our frame, my training is as a counselor. And our frame is, has always been a positive psychology view. Like we did positive psychology before it existed. It's very person-centered. It's understanding the person's strengths and working with them through their strengths to help them manage the areas that they need to grow in. It's also normal developmental. In psychology, you look at somebody and you call them sick. In counseling, we say, of course, you're struggling with depression because you were physically abused as a kid. Like, who wouldn't be depressed? We normalize it. And then work through change and try not to pathologize people and their behavior, but rather try to understand the path that led them to whatever behaviors are not working for them or whatever's going on, their self-esteem issues, and trying to change that. So it's preventative, it's developmentally focused, and it looks at the person in all of their life roles. So we have like an emphasis on career counseling, but we think of career not just as the job that you do, but as your, like you're a student, that's your career right now, or being a child might be your career, and then being an elementary school student, or your career in retirement, right? Especially for those of you in, since you're all from minority, non-white, there is not a single white person in here. So I'm half. So for the non-white cultures, we take care of our elderly, assuming that we're not acculturated. I'll put it that way, right? And so the elderly have an important role in the family to be sort of mentors and advisors and help with childcare when they're younger, when they don't get too old. So they have an important role also, and that's part of their career after retirement. So career is sort of a broader aspect of how we view the person, and we think about you and your different roles in life and look at the balance. There's one theory called Adlerian individual psychology, and they say you have to look at the person in terms of their intrapsychic issues, like who they are on their own, how they are in their love relationships, meaning significant other, how they are in their family relationships, how they are in work and school, and then how they are in their spiritual development. So you're analyzing all those areas of the person to make sure that all 5 areas are developed well in order to have health. And we're more, counseling is more health focused. So as I said, though, the work is the same when you hang up a shingle and decide to go into private practice, if that's what you want to do. In social work, it prepares you to run agencies a little better if you want to be an administrator. And in the Department of Counseling here on campus, we prepare people to be MFTs and LPCCs. So our degree is 63 units. When you complete we don't have any extras. When you complete the 63 units, then you are prepared to sign up to be an associate. It used to be intern. When you graduate, you become an associate. You sign up with the licensure board and you collect another 3,000 hours. All three professions require 3,000 hours. The MFT can count some of their hours from their master's program toward the 3,000, but the LPCC and LCSW don't. And you have to have a minimum of 2 years of experience post-degree. And then after those clinical hours are completed, then you can apply to take the licensure exam. So our program is different than social work or different than many other programs in the state in that we have a heavy emphasis on personal growth. As I said before, like in the couples class, you study yourself in a relationship as a couple. You analyze your parents. In the family class, you analyze your family of origin. In the culture class, you study your own culture and you learn the cultures of other people and how we can each other because we have different cultural assumptions. And then the group class, you act as a group member and you are doing groups. So you're doing personal growth throughout. And we also have a heavy emphasis on diversity, and we weave that. All of our faculty members happen to have a specialty in different areas of diversity. So that's woven in every class because we just happen to have faculty who are biased in that way. So there's not a class that doesn't talk about diversity and the importance, like looking at individualism, right, which is the dominant US culture, that I can pull myself up by my bootstraps. I don't need anyone else. I can do it on my own. And then within Latino culture, familisimo, right, that you put the family first and that's your priority. And then other things come after that. And people who are really extreme in familisimo, if they're less acculturated, they don't even have a lot of external friends brought into that family system because it's so tight and so large. And then Asian culture collectivism, right, where you value the larger group over oneself and you're always conscientious about your impact on other people. And so a collectivistic person is not going to assert themselves in the same way that an individualistic person is, right? They're going to move through the world differently. And so to help you understand how those different pieces, like time differentiation, right? Different cultures look at time differently. Far East Asians, very rigid about being on time, right? Southeast Asians and Latinos, time is more flexible. Relationships are more important than time. Now, I'm over stereotyping, but my husband is Colombian and he totally fits the Colombian stereotype. He's like, I'm ready to go. And my daughter and I go, that's about 15 minutes from now. We know that when I'm ready to go, we still have 15 minutes to wait for him. We know he will always be 15 to 30 minutes late. I lie to him when we go to the airport. What time do we need to be at the airport? I tell him noon, when we really don't need to be there till 1. And then we drive there. He's like, you're not freaking out. I'm like, yeah, because I knew you'd be late. I built that into our time scale. And so it's like, and then to not add value to that, right? Because from a US dominant cultural perspective, that's disrespectful, being late, you have to be on time, time is money, that means your time is more important than my time. But from a Latino perspective, relationships are so much more important than time. And what does it matter if you're 5 minutes late? I mean, maybe if you miss a flight, that would suck. But, you know, for other things, I know with my in-laws, when we say goodbye, they're Colombian, I have to build in an hour. We have to start saying goodbye an hour before we walk out the door. I went to a wedding once recently. Where were they from? So my friend was, she's Mexican American, and her fiance, now husband, he is Orthodox, but I think from like an African country. And the wedding started 2 hours late. I'm like, nobody's here. And I'm early, right? Because I have a Japanese mother and I have my dad's military, former military. So I'm late if I'm on time. Like, wedding starts at 2, I better get there at 1:45 or I'm going to be late. Yeah, and it was supposed to start at like 5 and it started at 7. So time differences, just got to understand it. I have to ask people, okay, so if the wedding starts at 5, what time should I be there? Right? So we have to like understand where these things come from and how they impact other people, and not ascribe meaning based on our own culture and be offended by a behavior that happens to be remarkably different, right? Religion is another piece that religion really informs how people see the world and how they frame things. And then we have to be respectful of other people's religion. And in the culture of counseling, we never impose our culture onto our clients' culture. So you have to see clients who do things that you would see as unethical, sinful, and you have to be able to work with clients and not judge them, right? Because you have to take it from their cultural frame, not your own cultural frame. So that's also part of what we do in our program. I think that's what makes us unique. And when we have a diverse faculty too, our faculty are Asian, Latino, and Caucasian. And then we have Middle Eastern adjunct faculty as well, and Iranian, and people from different faith backgrounds and different social class backgrounds. So that makes us really different at Cal State Fullerton as compared to like Hope University across the street, or some of the other institutions in Orange County. So yeah, that's something a little bit about the different professions, because a lot of times when people are trying to decide, and then what do you do with this degree? There's a lot. Very few people end up just being a therapist full-time, although some people do that, and you're certainly welcome to do that. But a lot of us who go into this field are kind of introverted and find that I can't see clients 40 hours a week. I'll be dead at the end of the day. So over time, they teach. So once you have a master's degree, you can teach at a junior college and you can teach undergrads. So they may teach a few classes on the side. That usually gets them their health insurance. Then they go have a little private practice on the side and see maybe 10 hours a week of clients. The going rate is about $120 to $150 an hour. Of course, you have to pay your overhead, but it's not a bad living. And then some people do supervision on the side. So they're supervising students who are in master's programs or people who are getting their hours toward licensure. And they do consulting. Some people write books. So some people end up working in human resources and EAP programs, employee assistance programs, setting up, and some people go into school systems and teach. A lot of our students stay in the university system and work as advisors and counselors in the university. So there's a whole lot that you can do. And then we had one woman who went through our program because she was an author. Her name's Elizabeth George. You can look her up. She's a New York Times bestselling author. And she did her master's in our program because she wanted to develop her characters more fully. So you don't even have to go through our profession because you want to be a therapist. You can, a lot of people, we had people for a while before we had a social work program on campus. We had a lot of people who had an undergrad in social work and did our master's program because they would get like a 15% increase in their salary for having a master's degree. So they just did it for that, to increase their salary at working for the county or whatever it was that they were doing. So you don't have to want to be a therapist, but we have to pretend like you're going to be and prepare people for that. We're an accredited program, and what that means, there are national organizations in many different fields, and there's usually one premier organization, and they accredit, just like our university is accredited by WASC. They say you have to meet these standards in order to be accredited, and so we're accredited by KCREP, which is the counseling accreditation, and it assures that we meet the highest standards in the profession in training our students. For example, our faculty have to continue publishing. They have to present at conferences. They can't just show up to class And they really encourage people to have private practices, and many of our faculty do have private practices. So it's one of the advantages of our program. The other thing that's different about our program, and this is something you don't know as an undergrad, but when you get to grad school, you find out that some of the faculty members don't like each other. And if you're associated with this person, then that person doesn't like you anymore. And then you take a class with that person and it's a problem. Our faculty, we all like each other. We have faculty, and that's rare because we're also small, so that's a privilege that we have. But there are faculties on this campus that really have a lot of hostility among them, and they can't make decisions very well, and it trickles down to the students sometimes, which is really, it's sad that that has to happen to students. So we have faculty retreats twice a year. We go to each other's house. We rotate whose house we're going to, and we do group therapy with each other. We just say, this is what's going on in my life. This is what's happening in my marriage or with my kids or with my parents. And we get to know each other better and we become friends. Because, you know, when you hear other people's tragedies and, you know, life, we've been together, most of us have been together 17 years. So we've seen deaths and marriages and all kinds of stuff, births. And you can't hate somebody when you see their bigger picture. So we have a really harmonious environment and like each other. So that, I think that passes down to the students too. Our students program, like they usually weed themselves out in the first semester if it's not a good fit. And then everybody else is just like ooey gooey happy when they go through the program, because if it's a good fit for what they want to do. So I wanted to present on those professions a little bit to give you an idea, because that's always a question about what's the differences between it and then what makes us unique and how we train. We do a lot of experiential exercises. We don't do a lot of lecture. You're not going to see a lot of PowerPoints. You're not going to do massive note-taking. You are going to write a lot of papers. You're going to do group projects. You're going to self-disclose. You're going to practice on each other. Yeah, so that's kind of us. And so what I want to do is open it up to you all to ask me questions about grad school in general, our program specifically, the mental health field, even for your own personal issues. I'm happy to answer questions. You guys have anything? Yeah.
So I was wondering about the difference between an MFT and an LPCC. I know MFT is a really strong degree here.
Yes.
But I was hoping to go to grad school in Seattle.
Okay.
And then come back here.
Okay.
And then have the option to go back to Seattle if I wanted to, but I want my license here.
Mm-hmm.
And then I know that LPCC is national, right? MFT.
Both of them are in all 50 states.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
what's really the difference?
Yeah. So in Washington State, the MFT degree is more of a systemic sort of focus, and you may want to get a co-AMFT accredited degree. So go to a program that's co-AMFT accredited, because then it would prepare you to be an MFT in any state.
Yeah.
Whereas like our program doesn't prepare you to be an MFT. We prepare you to be an LPCC in any state, but not an LMFT in any state. So get a co-AMFT degree. And how that would work is you can get your degree there, document the heck out of everything, when you go to grad school, especially if you're going into a field that requires some sort of licensure or certification, keep every single syllabus for the rest of your life. Because when you have to move, different states have different requirements, and the title on your transcript isn't going to be enough information. So you want to keep everything, all your hours. You'll have to document hours during your program. Keep all that paperwork in like 5 places, so that if it burns down or gets lost, you have some other. Yeah, exactly. I have stuff on floppy disks. I was like, oh, I finally printed them.
Floppy disk.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. I even have some bigger floppies too. So go to a co-AMFT accredited program, and then you would get your degree there, keep all your paperwork, make sure that it meets the California licensure law. It probably will if it's co-AMFT. And then it needs to be, for our state, at least a 60-unit degree. It can't be a 48 unit. Some states only require 48. I don't know about Washington. So make sure it's a 60 unit degree. And then when you get here, you apply for registration as an associate MFT to collect your hours. And if you decide to stay in Washington and get those hours, you can apply in California and Washington, and they'll count in both places. Like our program, because we prepare you for both licenses, we tell people apply for both the LPC and the MFT, and you can double count your hours. So you don't have to do 6,000 hours, you do 3,000, get it 2 licenses. So yeah, make sure you apply to both programs, but do a co-amped, because if you end up in any other state, you really need the co-amptee.
Yeah, I'm looking at Seattle Pacific University, and they're accredited.
That's good. Is it a 60 unit program?
It's 70 units.
Oh, good. Wait, 70 quarter or semester?
Quarter.
That won't count. We have to do 90 semester, 90 quarter hours in California. So that program's not enough hours.
Okay.
You would need to get another 20 quarter hour units in order to get licensed here. Yeah. Other questions? Grad school?
I have a question.
Yeah.
That's not related to grad school,
Okay.
but your area of expertise.
Mhm.
So do you find that like with stereotyping, it's how do you use that in your practice? Because stereotyping is negative, like, and even if you think it's positive.
It's both. It's positive and negative. So it
how do you
depends.
apply it?
Yeah. So first of all, we could come up with stereotypes about different groups. I've made some stereotypes about different groups. What's useful is to understand the frame that informs those stereotypes. What's negative about it is that if I sit with you individually, that I'm going to impose those stereotypes on you firmly, that's a problem. But if I hold them lightly and say, let's see where you fit and don't fit, then I can understand you better and be more sensitive. And where people think stereotypes are always negative is when we have a derogatory understanding of a stereotype, right? That whatever that stereotype is bad, right? So think of a negative stereotype from your own group. Let's just be safe and do our own group. Asians are bad drivers. I hear that. I never knew that one until I moved to California. I don't think there were. I think there weren't enough Asians where I lived in Dallas. Where I grew up.
But it makes sense.
Yeah.
Or especially in like Vietnam,
Mhm.
we don't have legitimate traffic laws, which is
Right.
why there's so many accidents. Like
Yes.
you can drive on the other side of the road. It's normal.
And Thailand is pretty chaotic too. So yeah, when we talk about like Southeast Asian cultures, a lot of people don't drive. One thing is the rules are different. Secondly, most people don't drive. And when you look at Far East Asian cultures, most people don't drive because there's lots of public transportation, buses and trains and subways and all that. So nobody drives. And then they come here and they learn how to drive at 50. And because my husband had that stereotype, and I'm like, that's not true. He's like, just watch. And we get behind someone slow, and he's like, let's see if it's Asian. And he pulls around, and I'm like, oh, it's an Asian. But usually it's an old man or an old lady. And I'm like, okay, so they're probably an immigrant, and they didn't learn how to drive until they came here. And it's a lot different than me.
Yeah.
I grew up in a car. I learned how to drive very early. The moment I could get my driver's license, I got tested for that. You know, I've been driving my whole life. So this assumption that they're innately bad drivers is stupid, right? But when we think about it from an immigrant perspective of how did they drive in their country of origin, and most likely they didn't drive at all, they took public transportation, then we can understand, okay, well, yeah, I think if I had to learn how to drive now, that'd be pretty scary.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be pretty frightened of this big giant vehicle that could do a lot of damage.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think about too, on the other contrast of people who are undocumented, right? They're going to drive more carefully because they care a lot more about not getting a ticket than I do. And then Asians tend to be rule bound, right? So that's another reason they're never driving over the speed limit. It makes me crazy. I'm like, the rule is 10 miles an hour, the speed limit. It's 45, you should be driving 55. That's my rule. Yeah. I like my rules better, but you know, whatever. So yeah, it comes from something. There are a lot of people who don't drive comfortably, so they're slow and they're cautious, and may not pay attention, like collectivism goes out the window when it comes to being in a car because it isn't part of their frame of what they grew up with. So if we think of it that way, then we're not, I'm not going to say, oh, every woman except for the two of you in this room can't drive, right? Because you're Asian. Some of you are going to be great drivers and some terrible drivers. I mean, that's just statistically what's going to happen. But we have to hold, okay, well, where does that come from? What's another stereotype? Give me a Latino stereotype.
Oh, Latino women are spicy and passionate.
Spicy
Always.
and passionate.
Nice.
Yes.
Spicy.
Yeah. So where do we get that stereotype? Probably from, oh gosh, now I can't, what are the soap operas called?
Novelas.
The novellas, right? So we get it from the novellas because we're not going to have a boring Latino on television or Latina on television. Nobody's going to watch that on TV, right? But then all the white people are all spicy and crazy too. And the other thing is that if you look at traditional Caucasian culture, I'm not saying all Caucasians are this, but who immigrated and had the most power in this country were Germans, English, Scandinavians, and what is their culture? Emotional inhibition. That's what they value. But Latinas are allowed to be more expressive than cold climate Caucasians. I'll call it that because I think of like France and Spain and Italy being more like Latin than they are. Yeah, even though they're still Europe. So I think what's okay for different cultures, that seems really spicy to somebody who's hugely reserved and holds everything in, right? But is it bad? No, it can be, right? Especially if somebody doesn't fit it, right? Like my Asian friends who are like, I'm terrible at math. I'm like, I'm good at math. I'll meet that stereotype. Yeah. So we have to understand the meaning behind them and not think of them in a derogatory way. And then remember that everything is on a bell curve, plus or minus one standard deviation. A lot of people fit it. And then the other piece is not everyone fits it all the time. I mean, that's another piece about like as a bicultural, biracial person or people who are bicultural because they're immigrants. Really first, second, and even some third generation people are bicultural, right? So they're going to code switch between being what is part of dominant American culture, dominant US culture, and whatever their home culture is. And so at home, they're going to act one way, but then when they're at school, they might act somewhere else. So we also have to think about like, we can't apply this to everyone in all environments in this country. It might fit for everyone in Japan to be very Japanese at home or at work, but when they come here, when people acculturate, they're going to expand their behavioral repertoire. So I always think of it as they may fit the stereotype a third of the people fit it about a third of the time. That's how I think of it, right? Because that's the 68 or 2/3 of the people, 2/3 of the time, because that's a 68%. Plus or minus one standard deviation on the bell curve.
Too much stats for me.
Too much stats.
I just took an exam.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
I'm just kidding.
PTSD.
I love it. I understand what you're saying. So cool. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, 2/3, right? 68%, plus or minus one. Yeah.
Do the students or any of the staff have any last questions?
Well, I just wanted to know about like the prereqs for the program.
Uh-huh.
Like if you had to be a like psychologist or
No.
psychologist.
We've had people with completely different, we've had artists, musicians. We had an Iranian rock star once. Like he was big in Iran. He was like, I'm going on tour. I'm going to miss some classes. I'm like, no, you're not. You might be a rock star there, but here you're a student and you got to show up. So no, you don't have to have that undergrad. The prereqs, you have to have some sort of statistics or research class. That's one that most everybody can meet. And then human development. So you might have to take that. A theories course. So you might have to take that. And then abnormal or psychopathology. So those are the three. So in psych, you would have gotten all of that. And I would recommend taking those in the Huser department because they're way easier than the psych department and way more fun. And Huser is more like us if you want to go into our program. So you'll get a better flavor for what we're like. Go to our website too. It has everything you need for the admissions process.
Yeah, I just printed that out actually, and I'm updating the linkage partners table that I made. You said that 3.5 is recommended, 3.0 is minimum, right?
Right, 3.0 is the
I'll
minimum.
add
It's
that
just we have about 400 applicants a year with 60 spots. And I would say maybe 100 of those applicants don't complete their paperwork. So I have 300 left. Probably 20 of those will end up going to doc programs and won't come to us. And then, and we'll interview maybe, what do we interview? 100 of those. Most of the 100 that we interview end up getting in the program. Most of them, even though we only take 60, because those are the 20 that end up going to doc programs, and then other people end up dropping out because they get pregnant or they decide to get married or this isn't the right time or they go somewhere else. So yeah, most of the people who apply get in, or who interview get in.
And you said that 3.5 is the last 60.
Yeah, we really take a look at that at the GPA. So when we analyze the files, we read your personal statement, and the personal statement needs to include answer the questions with some amount of self-disclosure, but don't vomit everything on it. You know what I mean? Like, you need to show some boundaries. You can say that, like, I had a really difficult childhood, here's some of the things, but then just, if you're starting to cry where you're writing it, you probably need to modify it. And then your letters of recommendation, and then, so we read those very carefully, and then we look at your GPA, and particularly in the courses in our field. So if you're thinking you want to come to our major, finish your degree in your major, but go ahead and take a few of these Huser classes. You can take 2 of the classes before starting, or you have to have 2 done before you start the program, and you can do 2 prerequisites in the program, but that postpones when you graduate, right? Because then now you're 2 courses behind. So, and we have options to go part-time or full-time.
Another question about the GPA. So it's cumulative undergrad GPA is 3.0.
3.0.
And then 3.5 recommended in the last 60.
We look at that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not an official
Yeah.
thing, but we're like, if you got an F in like the mental health classes that you've taken, we're like, or a C, we're like, you're not going to do well in this program. Because we actually look at your whole transcript. We're looking at, oh, you got a D in chemistry, oh, who cares, right? But then you got a D in theories, ooh, that's a problem. Maybe you can't do, because we got to make sure that they're able to be successful. So we're hoping they have A's and B's in classes that are similar to our field.
Do sociology courses from community college count? Or
They can. Community
not
college
really?
courses can,
Okay.
if they meet the criteria of the class. Are you thinking the statistics or research? Or?
Well, I'm taking statistics right now
Okay.
at health science, but I've also taken 4 courses in community college in sociology and psychology.
Well, they have to be those specific topics.
Yeah, I don't remember. Yeah.
Yeah, so they
Or
may
remember
not be.
specific.
But we've had people take junior college courses, and we're
Courses,
fine
yeah,
with that. Yeah,
okay.
so if you want to save money and pay $15 an hour for your tuition, go for
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dr. Brew, for
welcome.
coming and hosting our last Taste of Grad School for this semester.